A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away. Hi, everybody. Welcome to a behind the scenes edition of For Light and Dice. So, just a quick heads up if you have not listened to our entire season one, you really should before you listen to this episode, because this episode is going to contain all the spoilers. I'm Chris, I'm the game master and head referee of this here show. Thank you all so much for listening to us. We, for this behind the scenes episode, asked for a whole wide array of questions from our listeners, and boy, did they deliver. We have a ton of questions to go through today, and we're going to do our best to answer them all. Let's invite the rest of the crew that they're all here. Hope, do you want to start?
Hi, everyone. I'm Hope. My pronouns are she, her. I play Gaz, who is also she, her, but today I play myself.
Awesome. Robin?
Hi! Hi, I'm Robin. My pronouns are they, them. I play Zero, the droid engineer, whose pronouns are also they, them.
Awesome. Colton?
Hello. I am, Colton, go by any, and I play, Corael, the, Quirmian, consular, I think? I don't remember what class Anyway, I am no longer playing it, one end, and that's sort of the important bit.
Oh, heartbreak. Jess?
Yeah, hi, I'm Jess. My pronouns are they, them, and I play Lysander, the human, whose pronouns are he, him.
Awesome. And Charles?
Hi, I'm Charles, who's introduced perpetually last in these things because Chris hates me. My pronouns are he, him, and I play Win, the ice calf slinging Duros pilot, whose pronouns are he, they.
And for the record, I don't hate you. Your head is always, it's so big and heavy, it always ends up at the bottom row of my Zoom. So.
Well, it's burdened by all the thoughts, Chris. I have to have all the thoughts in my head, and so it weighs them down.
Well, your head does get larger every time
this.
I see you.
Love it when the girlies are fighting.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I'm not.
There's a reason it takes us 20 minutes to start a recording, everybody. To answer one of Gene's questions about the behind-the-scenes recording sessions.
Yeah, so as I just mentioned, we have completed season one, and we did some witchiness recently, and very excited for everybody to hear that during spooky season. So I have to ask the first question, because I can. How's everybody feeling about the show so far?
Yay.
People look so excited right now.
Yeah.
Crickets.
Oh, Charles is holding up the one sign.
Sorry, I had some mild technical difficulties. They have been resolved. Please continue.
That sounds like the summary of the show. Like, we're having mild technical difficulties.
Sorry, I'm having some mild technical difficulties.
And the Squonk is somehow still flying. It's fine.
It's true.
But to answer the question, it's going good.
Yeah, I'm having a great time.
It is. We're just having the most fun time over here. Nothing bad ever happens in the High Republic. Everything is cool. Nothing ever goes wrong. Now to take a big sip of my coffee and find out what's happening in Phase 3, which will be starting shortly after this episode airs.
Yes, as someone who has received some advanced information on Phase 3, I'm very excited for everybody to get into that.
Yeah, same.
Yeah. I think the comics come out soon as of this recording, so probably by the time this episode comes out, we'll have some Phase 3 content that everybody can start chewing on, and I'm very excited about that.
I think for me, I'd like to answer the question. Like, it's just been really rewarding. I didn't expect it to kind of turn into what it did. I didn't expect the twists and turns like Yagdul.
You didn't expect that.
I'm sure we'll talk a lot about Yagdul, Chris. I think one of our questions actually pertains to Yagdul. But it's been really rewarding. Like, we always talk in our little private Discord channel for the six of us, like, how it's kind of weird that, like, people, like, draw fan art of our characters and, like, are just as excited about this as we are, and people listen to us. That's weird. And they like our story. So I think if I had to put it all in one word, it's rewarding.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, from my perspective, I'm one of those people that believes everything happens for a reason. And before COVID lockdown, I used to believe that my heyday and golden age of tabletop role playing gaming and LARPing and all that kind of stuff was in college. And so when COVID came and I had to learn how to basically survive, I decided to play a lot of tabletop role playing games online. I tried it with different groups. I played some, I ran some. I really changed up my approach to running games completely overall, and I've had some of the best experiences with those games. And then this project starts, and it's been probably one of my favorite games I've ever run, much less it's been an excellent podcast for me to figure out how to fucking produce. But ultimately, I agree, it's rewarding. That's the biggest word I can think of to describe my experience with this. It's very, very rewarding, and I'm very glad that you all are part of it, even you, Charles. And I can't think of a better crew of people to do this project with. So there you go.
Now that we're all emotional, should we go into questions?
Yeah, let's go into questions. Charles is like, too many feelings.
Too many
can't handle
feelings.
it."
Too many. That's my win coming out because when there's parts of me that I look at and I'm like, yeah, that's win, and there's parts of me that I look at and I'm like, I'm more slightly emotional than this person is.
Yeah, so before I leap into questions just real fast, we sourced a lot of these questions through Discord. A lot of folks asked kind of variations of the same questions, so we kind of combined a few of them, reworded them. We do have a Discord community. It is free for all. If you're on X, Twitter, whatever you want to fucking call it, the link to our link tree is on there. You can click on that and find the Discord link there. Or you can do a search for Light and Dice link tree and find our link tree that way as well. The SEO works the same, and you'll find it. And that's how you can get access to our Discord. If you have any issues finding it through that process, just message us on Twitter, X, whatever, and we'll send you another link. But yeah, our Discord is available for everybody, and if you want to hang out with us between episodes, you can go there. How about that commercial?
You've gotten really good at them by now. I'm gonna have to start learning that one as well.
Oh God. All right, okay, so first question. Have there been any notable aspects or traits that you have discovered about your own character through playing the campaign, things that you didn't necessarily plan but just ended up happening?
So this is also from Jean Magpie McKins. We should say who wrote them. Because they're our lovely followers, and we love them.
Fair.
All of Lysander, honestly, because I did not have any backstory for Lysander when we started this game. I just said, here's a little guy, and whatever happens to him happens to him.
We're laughing just so we don't cry.
I love the joke of, like, he's on his tragic backstory.
This is it. We're doing the villain origin story right now.
Yeah, because with a lot of other tabletop like OCs I've made, they were like too angsty, and I was just like, we need to stop being such an edgelord, so we're just gonna make a little guy and hope for the best. And yet somehow, here we go again. Lysander's having a little moment too. He's going through puberty. Second puberty in his mid-20s.
It's a forced puberty.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about anybody else?
Zero was not exactly how I intended them to be initially, and you can kind of hear it in the beginning of the first episode. I initially sort of thought they would be more like Grumpy Brit, like a combination of K2SO and AP5, and that was the initial direction I wanted to go in. And there's like a twinge of that in the first episode, but it very quickly swerved into, just anxious being who does not know what is going on. And yeah. And I also didn't have any backstory because, why do that when I can just say there's no memory and I'll just make my GM come up with it, so.
What about
Appreciate that.
me, Robin, handshake. The handshake emoji.
Well, because I'm also going to partially join that handshake, because I knew certain aspects of Wynn going into the character, but I've also learned over time as I've played various roleplay characters in various TTRPG situations and forum situations and things. I've learned that there's only so much you can plan for a character at the outset. That part of the character's voice and part of the character's experience is you are going to have to kind of find out as you go, or at least I am for me. So when I had a couple of things worked out about them prior to rolling up the first session, so I knew that they were going to be the pilot. I knew that they were going to be on the run from the Bind Guild. I knew generally the backstory that they were going to have that we found out with Irvin on Naboo. But then during that first session, there were some things that I discovered. The big one, Wynn makes a crack about student debt in the first arc of the show. And so I was like, let me expand on that. So when I sent over the pilot, which is the short story that I wrote, I didn't give Chris the short story in the backstory in the form of notes. I gave it in the form of a short story that I haven't released to the other players yet, because there's still stuff in there that they don't know. But when I sat down and wrote that, it was a combination of stuff I had developed for the character originally and stuff that had come out of the first couple of sessions of playing. And by that point, I had a really good handle on who this character is and what makes them tick. So I get to half join that handshake. I knew some things before going in, and there's some things that I discovered as I went along. And I'm still discovering things about Wynn that I did not know.
Awesome answer.
My main one was One-N's mode of speech. The pauses that came was because the first time I did it, I was just very tired the day we recorded and couldn't think of words. Which is why there, was long pauses, and then I was just like, I kind of like how that sounds for the character voice, so that I just started adding the pauses. But other than that, I'm excited to find out the notable aspects or traits for my new guy, so.
I'm excited because we found out that Coriel helped One-N and that kind of background there. I can't wait to figure out that story. I guess for me, the thing that I discovered about Gaz, to be openly candid, I was personally actually really frustrated with her during the Yagdul arc. So frustrated that I came out of those games feeling really bad, and my fellow players don't know this, but I wrote a post-it note to put on my laptop that told me to stop talking, because I didn't know what she was going to say, and I was so upset with how I was playing her. And, my process when I write is that the characters are just kind of like these living, breathing people in my mind, and they talk to me and they tell me things. So it felt like during that entire arc, she just wasn't talking to me, and I felt like she was posturing and she wasn't doing things the way I wanted her to, and it was a very frustrating experience until I had two kind of realizations, and I'll say the other one in the next question. But the first one was the realization that she was a liar. And when I realized that she was a liar and that she was essentially trying to act like someone she wasn't, and that was what was happening during Yagdul, she was just trying to be this person she wasn't, it all kind of really clicked for me. And it was kind of like our space come to Jesus moment with me, because then I had that breakthrough and I kind of filled in some other gaps of her backstory, which I then sent to Chris. Was just here's kind of banging out this little part. But once I realized that aspect of her, and that she had been essentially 60-40 lying most of season 1. And now she's kind of having to relearn who she is, and having those moments of admitting that to Win and Zero was probably her biggest breakthrough of the season. I'm actually really excited to play her because she's gonna get to figure out who she is again.
That's awesome. The second part of this question, what was the thing that was most unexpected to happen to your character and changed how you initially thought that character would develop? And it also came from Jean, Magpie, and McKinsey.
I have a very, very clear one that absolutely took me by surprise as a character art, and that was Wynn's relationship to the Jedi. That was not something I expected to play as big of a role as it did, and also I didn't expect them to develop in a naturalistic way to coming in and having all those jokes that they made at the Coruscant episode and complaining about the Republic. They still don't like the Republic, but complaining about the Jedi a little bit. And the way that they developed over the season to have that moment at the end when they're like, no, actually, some Jedi are okay. And like the way that they had been talking about the Jedi up to that point, and having the experience of, working alongside Elzar, who's a very unconventional Jedi, and working alongside Orla, who's a very unconventional Jedi. Now it will be interesting to see if some of the damage Wynn has done with their attitude toward the Jedi vis-a-vis their other party members who were listening to some of the things that they were saying, if that can be undone, because they're not even aware that that happened. But that was the most unexpected thing for me, and as far as an arc went, was the relationship with the Jedi and how that shook out over the course of the season. I think pairing them up with Orla and Lysander was a really inspired choice on Chris's part. Not just because Orla Jareni is my favorite Jedi in the High Republic era, but because she makes such an interesting deconstruction and reconstruction as a character of what a Jedi as a job is.
I think for me, it was meeting Carr. Like, that was the breakthrough moment for Gaz, because that was the moment where she saw Carr, and then she essentially turned to me and said, hey, I used to be that 18 months ago. And I went, oh, okay, that there was the missing piece of your story that I didn't have, is that you used to be that horrible person. And that's when it all kind of clicked during the whole, like, her trying to act like someone she wasn't. She was essentially trying to fall back on that Carness that she had. So and it's like those moments that she looks back on, like when made a joke and she was just like, ugh, what's with your face? Like, those were like those like mean moments that she wants to undo and like kind of rebuild that trust with her team. So that was the biggest unexpected thing, and then killing Carr was like kind of like killing a piece of herself.
I'm glad you picked up on that, because that's exactly what I was going for with that character.
Oh, good.
So in preparing for this game, specifically that part of the game where the groups were going to get split up, I heard a very old podcast episode of me when I was part of a really big tech company, and I was on this podcast talking about our product and touting the company line, and I didn't sound like me at all when I was listening to myself. Certainly not my Dark Side Divas era me. Certainly not. And so when I listened to that, I thought about Gaz and was like, what kind of a character could I introduce that would give Gaz that same reaction I'm having right now with myself? And so that's where that character came from.
Guys, I think the show might be about how living under capitalism is bad.
Nah, perish the thought. Star Wars doesn't have politics in it.
Star Wars has no politics in it whatsoever.
It's not just capitalism, though. It's that how being idealistic and drinking the Kool-Aid can really prevent you from seeing the truth of the way things actually are.
I would agree with that, because there was a point in like Gaz's backstory where she was like fully in the Ritello Kool-Aid drinking. My brain just stopped. It's fine. I think she actually mentioned that to Carr. Like, there was a point where Gaz had a lot of money and power in a good position, and she could have had power if she was willing to give up her morals, which was that line that she figured out of, I need to get out of here. So the Carr was the biggest unexpected thing that was really the most help, and I commend Chris for that one, because it actually fixed everything with Gaz and me.
To go back to stuff that Charles was saying about Wynn and the Jedi, that whole little split up arc too, where it was just Wynn and Lysander on Naboo, also I feel like is where Lysander had the biggest change, and I started to kind of figure out what I wanted to do with Lysander too. Where in the beginning, he is very naive about everything going on, especially in the Republic and with the Jedi, like with his like hero worship of the Jedi being like, oh, they're so cool. And then him actually interacting with Elzar before Naboo, and then getting to Naboo and having the whole seeing my seeing dark side version of himself started to make him question like, what am I actually doing? And are the Jedi actually as great as I originally thought they were, especially with a bunch of them kind of rejecting him and being like, you can't be a Jedi. So there's that whole arc going on with him now, where he definitely is more jaded than he was in the beginning. Not as bright-eyed and bushy-tailed anymore. Who the heck said he was like Ezra at the end of season 2, beginning of season 3 of Rebels?
Robin's holding up their hand.
Oh yeah,
Right.
it was
Robin. I
Robin.
think we can blame Robin.
Yeah, I
it
was like, someone had said that, and I was like, oh my god, you're so you're so right.
That was instant to me. You like went and talked to the Squonk, and I immediately saw the scene of Ezra holding the Sith holocron just right in my mind, in front of my mind.
That's another like Corral thing, like Coriel thing that I keep wanting to say Coriel. So another Coriel thing that I'm really excited about, like having another Force user there with Lysander, like that's a relationship that I'm like really excited to see how you two hash that one out.
Yeah, I'm excited about that too, so that Lysander could see there's more than just the Jedi out there.
Well, it's also interesting because when you look at something like there's more than just the Jedi out there, you immediately default to something like the Sith or the Dark Jedi. When you're stepping off that path like that or having been rejected from that path, it makes it easier for bad actors to kind of get their claws into you and drag you in a negative direction because you're alone, you feel isolated, you're vulnerable. And so having Coriel around, I think, is going to potentially add an interesting new dynamic given what happened to Lysander over the course of the season and how he wanted so much not just to be a Jedi, but to know that he was not abnormal for the powers that he had and the things that he could do, that he wasn't broken, that he needed that sort of acceptance. And the Squonk crew could only provide it to a certain extent because none of them were really Force users. And it's almost kind of reminds me of the High Republic Adventures in a sort of much darker way. I don't know, maybe I'm just thinking about it because I'm listening to a podcast that's going through High Republic Adventures right now, but it kind of reminds me of like, it's playing with those same themes that Zine and Crix and all of them are exploring in that. I love how this show just feels very High Republic in a lot of ways because it's dealing with a lot of the same themes.
I did think about Zine a bit too as the season was going on. I was just like, is Lysander kind of Zine coded? Not clickbait.
Colton, is your unexpected thing dying?
Well, yeah. Well, yeah. I mean,
that was all of our most unexpected thing.
We were all so decimated in the recording.
Yeah.
Like, I know you couldn't see our faces, but we were all visibly upset.
I had to cut out a total of 30 minutes of silence because after one end died, we all kind of spoke a lot slower and we took a lot more pauses between things, and the energy was very traumatizing. And then to go back and re-edit that whole part, like I could hear everybody's like I could hear in real time everyone's heart breaking. It was a very real moment for us. And that's how you do character death correctly, y'all. You don't just like it shouldn't just like completely be meaningless. It needs to have a impact. And one of my favorite things of this show was we took the time to feel that trauma. And I don't think it's going to completely go away anytime soon. But yeah, that was a real moment.
it was. But also at the same time, I'm kind of not terribly sad. I loved One N, but also he didn't really have a character arc. And it's just, I think it's going to be more exciting to play a character that actually has like a definite goal and movement.
What I actually like, I don't know, if you want to see how much one it impacted Gauze, you should go on our Discord channel where we actually share Discord exclusive content like our characters' journals. And like one it actually really impacted Gauze a lot because I had this realization that every battle she was in, they were there, and now they're not there. And what that sense of safety is gone essentially because One was the best fighter of the group, so that's gonna be very interesting to navigate too.
Robin, what about you? Before we move on to the next question, what was your most unexpected thing to happen to the character?
Like all of it, but you might think it would be like finding out Zero's a sort of like agent of the Sith / Zakul, whatever. But honestly, I think the most surprising bit has been sort of Zero's relationship with death, and all the different ways that has sort of come out. I didn't necessarily plan to have like a weird reaction to it, being like, I'm gonna open this box with electricity, and then later the box is going to electrocute a hut. Oh shit, I committed murder. And then later, being fine with murder in certain, just kind of playing all the different reactions to that was not necessarily something I intended, but was very enjoyable to play out. Just all the different ways a character with no context for what death really means, but it continues to be faced with it and has many different reactions, has been quite enjoyable to play.
Awesome. Y'all kind of answered this, but I just want to give a kind of a clarifying question. Aether wrote, what was your guys' process for creating your characters? Or did you have other ideas before settling on who we now know as the Squonk crew?
And I do have an answer for this.
I do have an answer.
So, going through the process of creating Win, I sort of mentioned that there were elements of their backstory that I knew going into the first session, and there were elements that I left deliberately vague so that I could find out. But one thing for me, too, is when I play TTRPGs in group settings, or any sort of RPG in a group setting, sometimes I will look for what is a type of character that's going to need to exist in the group. And in this one, I was like, well, there's going to be a ship. Somebody has to fly it. So one of the things I did originally when we were in the process of creating characters, I was like, hey, is anybody playing the pilot? Does anybody have like a concept for the pilot that they really want to do? Because if not, I'm going to do it. And the answer was basically no, not really. I was like, okay, great. This is my starting point for the character. They are a pilot. And I also knew that I wanted to play some sort of non-cis character. Because as a cis man myself, I wanted to push myself out of just playing cis characters. So these were the two things that I knew going in, and then I said, okay, what type of character would be interesting to play in this era? Well, somebody who's a little bitter, a little grumpy. Okay, great. And then finally I settled on Duros because nobody else had picked a Duros. And also, I knew that it would be kind of funny to do a character who's reminiscent of Shriv from the Battlefront 2 game. So it's like, oh, this is funny. I'll go with this. And that was the process of creating character, was what does the group need paired up? What would be the type of interesting character that I would play? But that's just how I approach these things.
I did what I always did, and I had way too much background and story and information and had to learn how to let a lot of it go. As I do. Actually, like when making Gauze, I actually started with her concept first, which I was joking. I was joking with Chris and Charles, and I was like, I just want to do an ex-retail worker who just wants to leave and go do something else. And so I actually came up with the ideas of her skill and then how to find a class that matched it. And so I was going through all the classes, and I was like, operative is the closest. I guess she's an operative now. So, like, that was kind of the first thing, and then as we were playing the game and I kind of got more of an idea, I had some basic things, like I knew she was from Drag War 3, and I knew she had brothers and all that, but I didn't actually really start fleshing out, like, the details of her family and her backstory until later. And one of the biggest things that helped kind of like shape that idea was both her class and the fact I got into a TV show called Hell of a Boss. And there's an episode called the Harvest Moon Festival. And I even messaged Chris one night. I was like, I have inspiration from the evil cowboy in the show I'm watching. He wrote back, evil cowboy. I was like, trust me, it's fine. But in that episode, they go to like the hometown of one of the main characters, and it's a very like agricultural, rural town. And it made me kind of like rethink Dragor 3, because the only time we ever see her planet is in the Resistance era. And it's already polluted, but Flix mentions that it's only been polluted in his lifetime. So then I had to think backwards 300 years-ish, give or take, of like what the planet looks like and how it's shifting from being like a farming culture into a mining culture, but it's still in that transitional period. And that was really kind of clicked in place of like why Sasha was an important piece of Gaz's life. Like why Sasha as this weapon is actually like her family's greatest heirloom, and her guilt around owning it when she doesn't feel like she's good enough to own it. So like those were the two kind of big pieces for me, was coming up with a backstory and then connecting the class to it, and then going, oh fuck, I'm a gunslinger, I don't know how to shoot. And then connecting all that. So yeah, if you want to get the idea, go watch Hell of a Boss. It's free on YouTube, and it's very gay. It's the Harvest Moon Festival, and it's a musical.
And also, Hope is just going to keep banging that resistance drum forever. Into the void. Which, in fairness, so am I.
I mean, I did think of a Twi'lek first, because Twi'leks are my favorites, but Gazos are my seconds, and everybody does Twi'leks. And then I was just like, fuck, there's only 3 things with Gazos. And there's never been a girl Gazo in canon. We've only ever had male Gazos, so I had to think of like, what does a woman in her society look like? Actually, another Harvest Moon Festival in Gaza's journal, she says that she has a fling with Sally Mae, who is a trans character in Hell of a Boss. So yeah, so I had to like think about like, what does a woman in her society looks like? Why don't they wear pants? Stuff like that. Like those are important things I had to think about.
There you go. Anybody else?
I just wanted to play a droid.
Okay.
Yes, Colton, we know from your appearances on Gold Squadron Gaze that you like droids. You have a lot of feelings about droids, and you have a lot of specific opinions about droid sentience.
Don't be mean to Colton. I have the same feelings about
I'm not. I'm plugging Colton's episodes on Gold Squadron.
Yeah.
Also, I don't know what you're talking about, Charles. They're just appliances.
I did have a different idea for this game initially. I thought initially it would be an awesome idea to start right at the point of the Great Hyperspace Disaster. And then when I was starting to think about it more and I heard some of your character concepts, I was like, no, we need to do it before. Because I want Season 1 to be an introduction to the characters and let that be the focus point first before we do any of the major book events. And that's why I changed it up.
Incidentally, if you're listening to Season 1, Chris will use the 15 days to impact or something at the beginning of one of the episodes. That was not in our recording. None of us knew how close we were to this hyperspace disaster until literally the end of Season 1. So if you listen to the Season 1 finale, and Chris ends it with like 14 days to impact, and we all freak the fuck out, that is because none of us knew how close we were. We assumed we were like a year out or so from the hyperspace disaster. And so finding out, oh no, we're like 5 minutes from this thing fucking happening, right as we finally got the quest back on track. We're gonna figure out what happened with the Squonk and Zero, and then Chris breaks out the days until impact, and I'm like, I fucking hate you so much.
Talking about like unexpected things, like Chris like getting stuff to be Lorna D, and like, because we don't know those things are coming, like there's a mysterious person like happening in the background, and like we don't know who that is. It's not Marcion. Like those are things that we do not know, and like those are my favorite parts about listening to episodes, because to like hear those little bits, because there are three finding out about 3.
Brian, formerly of Pink Milk, as Zero the Hutt, is just inspired casting.
I love that, yeah.
Incredible casting. He's so funny in his one scene.
I have a a complete. Well, I actually will save the details of this till a later question because I see the list. I had a full cast of people I played D&D with that I recorded a whole thing for, but I ended up never using it.
Oh.
So, but I'll explain why later.
Jess and Robin, do y'all have answers to the question?
I like the droid design from Ninth Jedi and thought it would be cool to do a character.
You're so valid.
Amazing.
For me, I didn't really have a concept. Originally, I was in another Star Wars 5e game with some other friends, but then we had to stop playing, and I was really sad about the character I had in that game because I really liked them. But then their whole backstory is really tied to the Clone Wars and, that transitional era of the Clone Wars ending and getting into the age of the Empire. And so I was like, I cannot put them in the High Republic without changing who they are fundamentally. And then I thought, well, what if I made their ancestor technically? Because I still want to be a fun little guy from Lysatra. So, technically, Lysander is related to this other character of mine, except in my head, it's Lysander's younger brother, who's technically, like, that character's, like, great-great-great-grandpa or something like that. Because I don't know if Lysander would make it out of this campaign. So, if Lysander died, how would that other character be alive? So, that's also why Lysander has a younger brother. The end.
And yeah, that's awesome. That's interesting. Okay, so Hope asked me a question, which was, what was it like coming...
Hope, do you want to read the question that you wrote? And then we'll let Chris answer it.
Sure.
I guess. So, in our game, we landed at a gas station, and by the pump, there was just this random little gonk droid that was just hanging out. And then after we murdered Whisper and took her ship, we found these two lovable little balls just living there and having their best life. So what was it like to come across these random NPCs and then turning them into 1, 2, and Gonk, who have become just as much fan favorites of ours, like these favorite characters in the show, and like that process for you?
One of my key philosophies, whether I'm playing a game or running a game, is that you have to kind of bounce off of the vibe that everybody else at the table or the game session is giving you. You have to play off of each other. And for me, whenever I run a game appropriately, if I sense that the players are really responding to something completely random, whether it's an object or a character, I make sure to leave that in or continue to play off of that. And that often turns into memorable NPCs. So 1, 2, and Gonk are perfect examples of that. And it's just the way I run games. And it doesn't surprise me at all that there were random characters that y'all enjoyed more so than others. And it was pretty easy to me. Also, I do feel like sometimes our games get really, really serious. And it's nice to have comedic relief characters in the game that I can kind of bring to the table. Because more often than not, I'm also bringing, bad news and or trauma. And I don't want to just bring a singular type of energy to the game. I want to kind of switch it up a bit.
In one word, what should we expect out of 3?
Chaos.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah. Marcion is in trouble.
When is Marcion not in trouble?
We have to rescue that baby.
Okay, Jean asked a question. For those of whom this is the first tabletop role-playing experience, how interested would you be in trying other systems and genres? Well, Robin ran an excellent game with a different system. Do you want to talk more about that, Robin?
Quickly, before Robin says, shout out to Jean, who sent us several really good questions.
Yeah,
shout out to Jean in particular. We love all these questions, Jean in particular. And also just shout out to Jean for obsessively promoting our stuff on social media. We love you.
I should say his theme song, because he's actually a J Guys and Jedi listener.
Do his theme song real quick, and
Okay.
then I want to hear Robin's answer.
Yeah, Gene is a J Guys and Jedi listener from my show, and he has a theme song, and his theme song on our show is da-da-da-da-da-da, Gene! So, there you go. We love you, Jade.
Sorry,
Okay,
sorry, go ahead, Robin. I just wanted to shout out Jean real quick.
is all good. Wonderful. Thank you, Gene. Yeah, so the Night Sister is Dead. I actually had the idea for it a year ago. Like only a month or two after we had just started doing the podcast. I listened to a bunch of TTRPG podcasts, and a few of them have done little mini sessions using Grant Howitt's The Witch is Dead, and I was like, oh, that would be really fun to do in Star Wars if we just make it Night Sisters, and then thought that that would be a fun little system to bring in. It's super easy, it's super light, and we could just be goofy little critters and have a spooky little adventure, and I thought it would be fun. And then a year later I got to do it, and it was a grand old time. I had a lot of fun doing that.
It was a lot of fun. My theme with systems in general is that the system isn't important as long as the players understand the system. And we settled on a D20 based system because I knew that they're the most popular, and I want our listeners who are more experienced with tabletop role-playing games to just identify with the drama of what happens when, for example, Jess rolls a natural 20 versus a 1, So that's why we settled on the system, and I myself have played a shit ton of different systems, and to me the chemistry and the understanding of the rule set is more important than the actual rule set itself. So I'm always more than open to trying out different things. I anticipate in the future we'll do more side ventures into other crazy stuff. I personally would love to revisit my pig, my little my piggy character. He was so cute. But yeah, that's my answer.
Can we have them mosey in the background of an episode, and the Squonk crew is just look at them anyway?
Yeah.
Canonically, they exist.
They
exist in the For Light and Dice universe, thanks to some clever DMing by Robin. I would be curious Hope's answer, because I know that I've played other systems, Jess has played other systems, and I believe Colton has before as well. Hope, you indicated at the start of this campaign that you did not have a lot of experience with TTRPGs, and that's where some of our really good moments where we have to stop and really explain what we're doing in a way that something like Critical Role wouldn't comes from. So I kind of want to hear your answer to this question.
Yes, this is my first tabletop, and the answer I thought of was I'm sorry, we have to stop so often because I forget how sneak attack works. Which I still don't fully understand. It's fine. Even though I've watched 4 YouTubes about it. Yeah, it's been an interesting experience because I'm used to role-playing with my best friend, which is a different kind of role-playing. It's more like LARPing, but we'll have 2 characters sit and just have a 3-hour conversation, and it's all interesting and fascinating to us, and that's something that I been having to learn how to kind of consolidate those sort of things. I would love to sit down and have the Squonk crew just sit and talk for 3 hours, but that's probably not interesting to everybody. And as Chris nods his head.
I agree. I don't agree with that last part, actually. I think that my introduction to role-playing is LARPing, and sitting around, there were some LARP game sessions where I sat around with people and we just talked, we were just having a drink or a chess game, whatever, and we were talking as our characters. Those are actually some of my favorite memories of role-playing. And a good scene is always entertaining to listen to. So I think and we've had games where y'all have just sat around and talked for a long time, and I did very little stuff. There was, I forget which session it was, but I spoke for a total of 15 minutes in the whole 2.5 hour game session we recorded, because y'all were talking so much, and it was actually one of my favorite arcs of episodes.
I don't disagree, but I think also just learning how to pick and choose, not be oh, this is a thing we can circle back. It's more of no, we kind of need to push the plot and kind of pick and choose those moments. I think has been the most, and working in a collaboration, the trying to make sure everybody has a chance to have their voice. I'm not used to role playing with 6 people, so learning how to making sure that everybody gets that moment has been the most interesting part of the experience. But it's fun. It's a collaboration, and I enjoy the collaboration. And every collaboration, sometimes it has its ups and downs, but So like it is a learning experience and I enjoy it a lot. And I would like to play other systems. Like I really enjoy playing the Night Sister is Dead. And I miss our little guys already. That was so much fun. So yeah, I'd be interested to do other things. Though Robin was like, you should lead a game, and I was like, fuck no. Hell no, this is stressful. It's stressful just trying to learn.
If I can piggyback off of Chris's point real quick, just because that's one of my favorite aspects of the show is how roleplay heavy we are and how natural and easy that is. Most of my TTRPG experience before this game has been very mechanics heavy, very combat heavy, like rolling all the time, fighting all the time. And we have had at least one session where I feel like we barely rolled dice at all, and it was so much fun. Like I really love how we are so story focused and so character focused that we can just drop into that, and that the mechanics come in when the story needs them to, and we're not forcing the mechanics onto the story. We're able to just kind of let it all flow, and then when there is a moment to pause and let the dice decide something, then that happens. But a lot of it can just be generated by us role-playing together.
I guess my only question is I feel like we're leveling up really fast. Is that normal?
So in the system we're currently using, you do level up quickly at the beginning, and then it starts to slow down like a lot.
Okay, because we're at like level 4, and I just feel like we're like on a hype train or something, and there are no breaks.
I mean, but also remember, we've been playing this game for a year. It's actually a little slower than what I usually do from the beginning.
Are you fucking kidding me?
No, I'm not.
Oh my god!
If you play Dungeons and Dragons, and you're playing like a wizard or a sorcerer, levels 1 through 4 suck. They suck hard. They really, really do, and like you don't really become a useful character till your 5th level. So abstractly, or whatever the proper word I should have used was, the system's kind of designed so that you move from 1st to 5th level fairly quickly, and then there's a big drop off after that where it takes a really long time.
Okay, that makes sense. I think that's the other thing, is like, since this is the only thing, this is now my normal. And I'm like, well, it will either help or ruin other games in the future.
Yeah, my one of my favorite D&D games I play with right now, my character just got to 9th level after playing this game once a week, every week for 3 years. That's pretty slow. And the DM's name is Stephanie, so Stephanie, I'm not hating on that, by the way, but I would like another level, 10th level, please. That would be great. Anyway, next question. Jordan asks, would you all ever consider guest players for Game or 2, and how do you think you'd want to do it? I would not. And well, there's 2 exceptions. One I'm going to keep to myself for now, but the other exception would be if, like, say, Adam Driver showed up to my door half naked and choked me and said, I want to be on your show, then I would say yes. But chemistry is really important. You cannot automatically just snap some random person into the group and expect it just to flow the same. It can really change the dynamics of a group. It's extremely rare, from my perspective, to have a group of people work so well together and tell a story so well together as this group has. We are truly blessed in that way. And I do think having a guest, even just for one game, could throw off the dynamics. Now, there's a setup. I think it's fairly obvious. I may eventually have one person join us for a game session for a very specific purpose, but they would not operate like a PC. They would be an NPC, and I would be telling them, you're here for this specific purpose, you're going to do this specific thing to the players, and then after that, let the chips fall where they may. And that's the only condition I would have for a guest person be on the show.
It's also just this raises an interesting point that I kind of want to bring up that doesn't get talked about a lot, which is that there's also a production aspect to this show. And it sort of seems from the games themselves and the way that they sort of play out on the episodes and the way that the vibe is of them, that it's just something that's recorded and thrown out there. It actually requires a lot of scheduling and a lot of communication between the 6 of us to be able to pull this show off. It's kind of a small miracle that we're able to put out episodes as consistently as we are, other than a handful of exceptions, like when the party was split, or that one time that Colton, I think it was, had to not be here for part of a recording session. Other than that, we have put out episodes consistently with all 6 people being involved. It's fine if, like, you know, if you're just playing a tabletop game and somebody comes in for somebody's friend or whatever that everybody knows comes in for one session as a PC and then leaves. On the production side of things, it's a lot harder to do because that's an additional person you have to schedule. That's an additional person you have to get the audio track for. That's an additional person that Chris has to edit. And that adds up as well. So some considerations have to be made. There's some things that maybe people could do in their own games at home that we can't necessarily do on the show, just in a producing capacity. I don't look at it as like, oh, this wouldn't be something we would do because it's a terrible idea. It wouldn't be something we would do because it would be really hard to do as just producers on this show to pull something like that off. It would have to be done in very, very, very special cases.
Good answer. Good answer. Does anybody else have thoughts on that?
I would like Adam Driver to come on and be a guest
and choke you, and yeah,
Well.
okay, cool, yeah, sure, cool. I think we agree. I love this second question, and I saw this question ahead of time, and I had a curiosity, so I actually know the exact answer to this. Exactly how many times has Charles said the phrase "large Duro's forehead"?
Oh, can we take bets? Okay.
Jordan,
Yeah.
I fucking hate you.
Okay. So we're guessing.
I love Jordan. Shout out to Jordan, who posts under the name Kerfuffle. She is the artist who did the Win art. She does the Gold Squadron Gaze little banner art that you see if you go to any of the Gold Squadron games and you see the little figures of Bradley and myself. That was done by Jordan. Fantastic artist. Sometimes her commissions are open, sometimes they're not. I have had them closed for a while because I have had her working on something very big. But they may be opening up again here soon. Follow her on socials, check her page to see if she has commissions. Especially, her bread and butter is actually doing people's TTRPG characters and game characters. She does a lot of commissions for, like, people's D&D characters. So definitely check her out. She is fucking phenomenal. I hate her for this question because I know she included it just to be snarky at me.
So you know the exact number, Chris, right?
I know the exact number, and I can explain how I came up with it.
I am going to guess 9.
Are we doing Price is Right rules?
We're doing Price is Right rules, so
Okay,
if you go
cool,
over,
cool.
you're wrong.
Oh, Price is Right
9,
rules?
Okay.
Okay, 7 then.
Okay.
No, I'll stick with 9.
I think I've said it at least 15 times.
Okay.
I'm gonna say 16.
16, okay.
Because that's what game theory says I should.
I'll say 17.
Okay.
I know Charles says it a lot, but I don't know if it's that much. I'm gonna go with 12.
12, okay. So a friend of mine is developing this really awesome AI tool where it can automatically spit out transcripts by listening to an audio file. And if you're asking it to scan for a certain phrase or a certain word, it will give you an exact count. So according to this tool, Charles has said this 26 times. And that is based on what's been published. I know for a fact I have had to cut out certain parts of the show where he said that more than that. So at least 26 times.
There's an interesting thing, and I've discovered this when I'm writing, but I've also discovered it a lot while playing. And one thing going through and, like, editing a large text, I'm editing something that's 80,000 words right now. But when you go through something, any creative endeavor where it's word-based, that has a large volume of words, you're going to run into uses of the same phrase over and over again. And this is especially prevalent in an audio medium because you don't have that ability to go back and, like, visually see it. So I have a lot of times when I'm writing that I'll have sort of a shorthand, like a character replied, or they take a moment and then say something. And I have to go back and tweak some of those later because in the moment, I'm just defaulting to a thing that I know works. And so this is an interesting challenge between the medium of writing and the medium of audio. I don't have the ability to go back and edit that afterwards. So something that's interestingly challenging for me is to say, how do I vary up the things Wynn is saying? How do I vary up the descriptions? And shout out to Chris, who has to do this way more than me because he's DMing the game. But it's an interesting point too of the differences between something as you're hearing as you're playing it, like as you're saying it out loud and you're hearing it in your own head, versus how many times it's actually said on the recording, or if you're reading, a fanfic or a book or a serial or anything that you might be reading, how many times the author glossed over something because that's just their default. I know this was a joke question, but there was actually a really interesting concept in terms of creative endeavors, word-based creative endeavors, and things that authors and creatives can look out for when they're writing dialogue, when they're writing prose, when they're writing any of this. So I think the question was inadvertently extremely interesting, and I think that's just something that comes with the territory, but it's also something that creatives can be mindful of when they're doing these types of mediums, because there's going to be a decent amount of repetition, and the challenge is to find new and different ways to say things while also not completely going off the fucking deep end. I also just think the visual of Wynn touching the side of the head is extremely fucking funny to me. That's just hilarious.
Also, Charles has a very big forehead, so he's kind of identifying.
I also do have a very big forehead in real life, and I can't even blame my lack of hair for my forehead.
I love that. I love that a lot. Okay.
Chris's
Gene...
face when I said this was very funny. He's like, I hate you so much.
Okay, so Gene asks, oh gosh. As all game masters know, the players tend to go off in their own direction, regardless of what's been prepared. Is there anything that you spent time prepping that, now that it can't be used due to how the game went, that you'd like to share? Yeah, actually. Now Hudda, which then spat out to Yagdul. That whole situation was going to be completely different. I was actually anticipating y'all would get captured. It did not go that way. Y'all were stealthed the fuck out, and then, Colton had to leave early, so we did a separate thing with 1N, and thus the legend of Chuck was born. But I had a whole scene recording of the Hut Crime Council getting together and talking about what they were going to do to the Squonk crew. We were kind of halfway done with it, and then I was like, okay, we kind of need to keep it open-ended so to see how the actual game was going to unfold. And of course, what happened, and it didn't turn out the way I anticipated at all. And so I just told my friends, hey, we'll just record something else later. What we did is not going to apply to the game. So, we'll see how that I still want to have them as part of the game because they actually help me brainstorm ideas for this game all the time.
Do you still have that recording?
I was trying to look for it the other day, and I don't know where I parked it. I'll have to ask them if they have their backups too. But
just because I would love to hear it, even if it's just like in the middle of this episode, just like, Andy, you can hear it now.
Yeah,
I just would like to hear that, even though, yeah.
Yeah, I was looking for it for the past couple weeks. I don't know what I did with it, and part of me is worried that I deleted it because I didn't put it up on Drive. But I'll have to see if I can figure out a way to resurrect it. I was playing Mama the Hutt. Yeah, so she was going to make an appearance. I still anticipate her appearance at some point. So I love Mama.
Well, I mean, there's still a chance that this gets to happen, right? Because there's still a bounty on our heads, isn't there?
I thought Marcion erased it.
Oh yeah,
part of
Marcion erased it. Yeah, or Nihil interceded, I would say. Lauren asks, I like this question. Will there be any more cameos of any High Republic characters or any locations visited that we might know? And for the players, any High Republic characters that you would like to see in the game?
I have more of a location that I would like to see in the game. I need us to go to Starlight Beacon. I need that to happen so badly, more than anything. I also kind of want us to meet Skier.
Not after we talked about
especially after we talked about. I think Starlight, given the relationship some of the characters have with the Republic, and Lysander and Gauze being from more rural areas and what Starlight Beacon is intended to do, I think would be a really interesting location for us to visit eventually. I just wanted to get that out there quickly. I know there's a part 1 that Chris needs to answer.
The answer to cameos is yes. I'm not going to say that any more than that. You really want the Squonk to be near Starlight Beacon?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
See, I want to take Colton to Valo, so like the Republic Fair on Valo, so we can like play games and go see the zoo and look at
Hell yeah!
Yeah, it sounds like so much fun. Like Colton should experience Valo for the first time. That's gonna
For context,
great.
Colton has only read Wave 1.
Yeah,
Colton does not know what happens in waves 2 and 3 of the High Republic. But yeah, I also think I wouldn't put it past Chris, who's a jerk, to have us coincidentally end up on Valo at some point.
He's a jerk because he wants us to have such a good time at the Republic Fair. Yeah, nothing happens at the Republic
United
Fair.
in song.
I'm actually really interested how the Dringir might play a role in this, especially knowing that Wynn knows where the Amaxine station is and has been there. Like, that's a thing that I'm a little bit interested in. And on one hand, I would love to see my sweet favorite Dilf Loden, but I'm also scared, and I'd actually rather not have Loden at all because I know Chris would do something horrifically horrible to him. So
I do nothing wrong to Loden. It's the characters that do stuff that's wrong.
So Chris would do something horrifically horrible to Loden, and I don't want to even put myself through that because I've already felt that wonderful nothing bad happened to the Republic, the High Republic, Colton, once in my life.
I want to see Stellan Geos.
Yeah.
Stellan Geos, they can't convince things.
I love Stellan so much.
Vessel crew.
Oh, Vessel crew.
Yeah, let's see Geode for real.
So I will exclusively reveal, it's in the short story. I think I may have mentioned this before, but Wynn has met the Vessel crew before. Wynn knows Leox and Geode. That was in the pilot that I sent to Chris, and I put that in there for a very specific reason. That Wynn has actually met them in the vein of meeting somebody who works for the same company as you. So that's not an impossible thing.
I'm just very anxious to get to a moment where we do completely and utterly break canon. That is what I am just dying for.
You just want to see my face when that happens.
Yes.
I am anticipating that happening in season 2. I just don't know how, and I don't know what it's going to be, and I don't know what the echo effect's going to be. But I'm actually surprised it hasn't happened already.
Same.
Yeah.
I was going to say something really inappropriate. And
on
I was
this
like,
show?
Well, gosh, we are a G-rated podcast.
Yeah.
We never say anything inappropriate whatsoever.
Hashtag Jizz still canon.
the Jizz truthers know.
Jizz truthers.
Jizz is still canon. Twitter's just overreacting again.
Yeah. Also, pre the last question, I really want to see Yarael Poof. My favorite Jedi Master.
I want Coriel and Yariel to interact.
Can we?
Like, oh, hi.
It would be great.
Awesome.
Especially based on an image that came out recently of a comic book with Yarael Poof talking to a bunch of senators.
They're not senators, but I'm not going to explain.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, whoever they're talking to, based on what the text was saying behind Yarael, I think Coriel would be very not pleased.
You know who my final answer is to this question? I mean, Starlight Beacon is the main answer, but you know who I really want us to meet?
Who?
Chancellor Lena So.
Yes, I do. I actually hope we bump into her at the Republic Fair.
We keep running up bar tabs and repair tabs in Lena So's name. So there's this random ship flying around the Outer Rim. We don't even have her code or anything. We're just opening tabs in her name, and we're on the Outer Rim, so apparently nobody thinks to ask why we're opening stuff in Lena So, the Chancellor of the... Why we're going around being like, yeah, put our tab under the name Joe Biden.
I had a hilarious dream that I actually woke up laughing, and I wrote it down in my dream journal. Yes, I have a dream journal. Where I met Ian McDermott, and I convinced him to do a scene for Light and Dice. So the day that the Jedi are gonna like roll up to him and try to take him out, I had this vision where Palpatine's looking in the mirror and he's practicing "I am the Senate" line over and over again. And then his little underling comes in. He's like, sir, the Hutt sent us this bill with interest. It's like 5,000 credits. And like Palpatine goes off and was like, how dare they, blah, 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 blah. Who's responsible for giving us this debt? And the guy says, the Squonk crew. He's like, who? And that was like my whole vision. I would have loved to have done something like that at some point, but you know.
That's
we'd
the
have to be really
epilogue
cool.
for the show once it's over.
Yeah, there you go. Magpie sent us a bunch of questions, and some of them are aimed at specific people, so I'll go through these. Another question that has great potential for goofs. If the crew of the Squonk was in the Clone Wars era, what would they be doing? Would they be annoying some Sith, accidentally killing Hutts, perhaps thirsting after clones? I'm very curious about what y'all think about this one.
I think 1N would probably be murdering a lot of people. Just because I don't think Coriel, as being part of 1N's backstory, would be conducive in the Clone Wars era. So, like, without that, 1N's just, you know, not a person, just a program, and doing a lot of killing.
I have an unbelievably spicy take. I think Wynn would have been a separatist.
Ooh.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. That's not
in the
spicy.
sense of like the bad guys we see in the Clone Wars,
Like the Mina
like, early
Bonteri.
seasons. The Mina Bonteri, the one we see in the Bad Batch, the separatist. That kind of like actual idealist. Because looking at Wynn's backstory, you know, Wynn is from Corellia, as somebody who's screwed over in the way that Wynn is screwed over, and views the Republic as kind of this even in the High Republic era, they view the Republic as a massive overreach. And they view the Republic as something that really just needs to mind its own business. And I think they would be extremely sympathetic to the idea of planets being like, actually, we really don't want to deal with this. I don't think Wynn would make it very long in the Imperial era, sad to say. They're a little too vocal, and they're a little too anti-authoritarian. But that leads into another question that is asked later on that I do not want to give away. But if they were in the Clone Wars era, I think they would be sympathetic to the Separatists, and I think they would be working with the Separatists.
Here's my thought on the question, because it says if the crew of the Squonk, because Gaz with the Squonk crew is different from Gaz on her own, and it makes me wonder how they would act differently. Like, you know, if it's an Imperial era Wynn has an entire crew to be like, shut up, Wynn! So I think that's the interesting twist on this question, because if it was the crew of the Squonk, Gaz would be doing whatever would keep everybody the safest, and kind of being like the mom friend of the group, you know, and being that kind of voice of just like, there's a war going on, like we need to figure out how to just keep everybody alive in this war, and then fuck morals for a second, because my priority is keeping the crew alive. But if it's Gaz on her own, she would probably be back home on Dragor 3 with her family, protecting, because they were a fuel refinery planet, so they probably would be fighting over to get that fuel, so she would actually be protecting her planet with her family, to be honest. So it's really a two-sided question of whether or not she's with the crew.
What does everybody else think?
I feel like Zero would probably stumble their way onto some sort of battle droid ship, like accidentally, and then like make friends with them, but not really know what's going on. And eventually, I feel like it would get back to Palpatine that this droid with this weird Sith connection just stumbled in here, and they probably wouldn't last very long, unfortunately.
With Lysander, I don't know, because that's hard, because like I said, I had made Lysander in my head as the ancestor, distant relative of a character who I imagined is living in that time. And I guess, yeah, Lysander by himself without the Squonk crew probably wouldn't have left Lysatra if it was the Clone Wars.
Would he enlisted with Eli? Would he know Eli Banto and enlist together?
Oh, wow.
Maybe. I feel like, yeah, his parents also would have made him enroll in the Imperial Academy.
I immediately had popped in my head when I read this question, a scenario where Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Ahsoka are on one side and Hondo Anaka is on the other, and you all are in the mix. I feel that particular situation would have been perfect. I don't know how the outcome would have been, but I entertained that idea. But then I also thought about the Squonk itself, and with the rise of the dark side, how would that impact the two crew members that are force sensitive? And of course, Palpatine would love to get his hands on a Squonk.
I think it would be a really fun like AU one shot, or even maybe like a two shot. Like if we wanted to do like a in between seasons AU, I think that'd be really fun. I think we can all agree that we would all be thirsting after the clone.
Yeah.
I think that's the one thing we could all agree on.
I am not 100% sure what Wynn's sexuality is at this point. I genuinely cannot say whether or not they would be thirsting after the clones. I have not explored that aspect of the character at this point.
Cool.
Just at a point, I think.
I realized also, just like, oh yeah, Lysander is force sensitive, and if it's going into the Imperial era, that's a dangerous time for any force sensitive with Inquisitors running around.
Inquisitor Lysander AU?
Oh, it's really funny because that other character I mentioned was going into the dark side because they were also force sensitive, and I was making them do Inquisitor stuff.
I have my feelings about the Force Unleashed. We don't need to get into that on this podcast. However, I do think the idea of, like, Inquisitor Lysander and then the Squonk crew is basically the Juno Eclipse and whatever that droid is, that are just, like, ferrying him around to do his Inquisitor stuff, but they're also all just super inept at it. I find that mental AU very funny. I think that's hilarious.
I just realized that's how Gaz dies. Like, giving Lysander and Coriel a chance to escape and staying behind. Like, that's how she would die.
Aww.
To escape Order 66.
And on that really depressing note.
Right?
Next question, please.
Excluding the High Republic era, what era of Star Wars would your individual characters be comfortable in, and why?
I have another hot take for this one.
Oh, great. Oh, wow.
And this allows me to bang one of my favorite drums. The sequel era. The sequel trilogy.
Okay.
The difference being, Wynn has a lot of complicated moral feelings about the Republic and the concept of institutions. Wynn is also a very moral character, though. Maybe not an ethical character, but Wynn has a great deal of morality to the decisions that they make. And I think the situation that is set up in the sequel era versus the Rebellion, that the Rebellion era and the Alliance to Restore the Republic in general, it's in the name. The Alliance to Restore the Republic. And the point of the Rebellion was not just to topple the Empire because it was wrong, but because they wanted to reinstitute the Republic that had fallen. Whereas the Resistance under General Leia, they're combating the First Order not because specifically it's the reigning government at the time and they want to institute themselves back into power, but because it's the morally correct thing to do. That Leia Organa looks at the rise of the First Order and looks at the fact that the New Republic isn't really doing anything about it and says, fuck you, I'm gonna do it myself. And I think Wynn would do much better in more of a clear-cut situation like the dynamic between the Resistance and the First Order. I think that they would find it much easier to resist the First Order and to fight alongside the Squonk crew and do things for the Resistance than they would for the Rebellion. They would have the Kanan Jarrus approach to the Rebellion, whereas I think it'd be much easier for them to side with the Resistance. The sequels are also good, actually. You just weren't paying attention.
What about everybody else?
Well, if I learned any lesson from Din Djarin in The Mandalorian, it is that Star Wars characters that don't know that they're in Star Wars can just kind of fail up. And so I think Zero would do really well in the New Republic era.
Okay.
I was gonna say that I also think Lysander would do well in the sequels era. I think Rey and whatever they're gonna be doing with Rey, which I'm hoping for, but doing her new Jedi stuff would be a good friend to Lysander. Rey and Finn. Throw Lysander in with those pals. I think he'd have a good time.
I just had a really scary thought that Gaz in her Retalo phase would have made a really good Imperial. I had that realization just now, which is why I think she would actually function very well in the Rebellion era, because she would be kind of that like DJ in The Last Jedi kind of like character, just sort of playing both sides, only she would be probably doing it for benefit of the greater good. So she's really good at swindling and sweet talking and like we like tricking people and taking things, and I could see her then taking that in turn and giving it to people who actually need it, like a Gaza Robin Hood like experience sort of, but on a very small scale. Like I don't expect her to be like Luthen Rail or anything, but like she'd probably find like this like little niche in this little place and then move on when she needed to and then reestablish. But retail guys would have made a very scary Imperial.
Coriel would definitely just love to just chill on Plaisir 15 in the New Republic.
Gosh, I wonder
fantastic.
if Colton recorded an entire episode where they had a lot of thoughts about Plaisir 15 on perhaps the show Gold Squadron Gaze, where they were on that episode of The Mandalorian.
It's actually a
No, I
really
do what
good
you're talking
episode,
about.
guys. It's a really good episode. I can listen to it.
Here, here.
But because of how long-lived Quirmians are, I think just all the eras. I don't think like assuming he lives.
Corio has his Taylor Swift tour. Like eras.
The eras.
Oh my
turret,
god,
yeah.
I realize, yeah. If Yarl Poof made it to the freaking Clone Wars, if Coriel lives through this
Yeah.
campaign, Coriel can be alive during that time.
Yeah.
Coriel is Taylor Swift of Star Wars, not clickbait.
I feel Coriel, in an attempt to help the Resistance, would do what Yariel Poof did in that Robot Chicken episode. Just become like a cafeteria worker on the Death Star and just like feed information outwards because I say so and it's funny.
That's awesome. That's awesome. My answer is I agree individually. I think the characters could exist in different eras, but as a group, I don't think the group works in any other era but the High Republic. I just think that the way the entire galaxy is laid out right now and the chaos this group brings, it's a perfect combination of lawlessness so they can get away with shit and but just enough structure in the galaxy where they can rebel against something. So that's my answer. Oh, I love this question. How was the experience of splitting the party as players and as a GM? For players, what was it like not having the full picture? And for Chris, was it tough keeping track of who knew what?
The way that Charles and Jess would troll us by putting in our group chat, like, oh, I love when redacted happened to redacted and then redacted happened. That was a fun, 3 weeks.
Jess and I truly hit our peak trolling the other players while that was going on.
But I really liked it. It was a lot of fun. I actually hope, I'm sorry to say this, Chris, I hope we do it more.
Yeah. It's in the plans, yeah.
Because I like those times of those small groups. Because for Gaz, she really clicked. I felt like that's where she kind of had this idea of one being the protector, which that's now gone. And I felt like she and Zero really hit a really good stride to lead into that epilogue niceness of that was happening. It was a lot of fun, and that's kind of the thing that I was hoping to get more of this game, is just to have those smaller scenes between the characters and to help them grow, because that was probably the other rewarding thing, is watching how this found family fell into place and what everybody's place was in the found family, because Gaz has very specific thoughts about each player. Not each player, each character. Yeah, she judges all of you. So it was a lot of fun not knowing, and then getting to live tweet it, me and Jess taking turns live tweeting. That was a lot of fun to actually experience the episodes with everybody else.
I actually just did this last week in another game. It is one of my absolute favorite things as a player, to be able to experience some of what's going on from the outside, and also to be able to be in a bit of ignorance, because I don't listen to the episodes before they come out, generally. I don't do that. And the reason I don't do that is because I like to experience the cameos and all of it at the same time as the listeners do. Because I've recorded the game, and I like to be able to be surprised when Lorna D shows up, or there's a Zero the Hutt scene, or there's some shit going on behind the scenes with Rural Thess that I didn't know about as a player. So for me, it was a very fun experience, not knowing what was going on. And then also, we did have a session where we all recorded at the same time, like, but it dropped in like in medias res. So the entire thing with the junk gonk had happened, and Carr was on the ship. And so Jess and I are sitting here like, we have no context for what we are hearing from the other players.
Yeah,
as
them
we're
being like the
recording
baby, and we're like, what the
The
baby?
What the fuck is that?
Yeah, and then I randomly bring up baby 000, and the look on your guys' faces.
During that same episode, like, Jess mentioned that they had a Kuiper crystal, and like the three of us were like, "I'm sorry, what? Lysander has a Kuiper crystal
What?
now?"
I love it when that happens personally, that something, and I think it's something too that's unique to For Light and Dice. I think because it is an audio podcast, that it's not like a game. Like if there's a split party and Chris, the DM, decides to do one party and then the other, it's not like, Hope and Robin and Colton are just out of the room and they don't know what happened in that session until we tell them. They can go back and listen to it later. And that's something that's really unique about this game, is even when there's things that happen that other players don't know about or we don't know about, we will find out when the show airs or when it gets dropped in for QA. We will learn what happened. And so I think that's something really cool as a player that I get as an experience in For Light and Dice that I would not get to experience in another game in a different medium for a different purpose.
Yeah, I mean, as a GM, that's what I love about this project. I take copious notes when I'm running a game with people, and I'll be like, I made sure to hit this story point and that story point, and I have it in a note. But if I save that story for like something a year later, sometimes the context of that line or that note is missing completely. But because I have recordings For Light and Dice, and if I have a question about a thing, I can go back and listen to the scene and get the full context of it. It's really easy to do split up games because I won't forget anything. I have it recorded.
It just made me also think of that time when Colton recorded an episode alone with Chris, and none of us had the context for that either. For like a few weeks, because we were like, what happened? And then we had the whole Chuck thing, so...
Poor Chuck.
That brought us some of our best, like, running jokes, too. Like, is this a Chuck scenario?
One other thing for me, too, and I have to shout out Chris in this moment in particular, is that as somebody who's a lore hound and as somebody who really likes universes, like internally consistent universes, the way that Chris has built up the internal lore of For Light and Dice is nothing short of incredible. And a lot of it is this work of making sure that everything ties together. Things that were seeded pay off. Things that were world-building details are remembered and brought back up again. That For Light and Dice, looking at the commentary in the Discord, looking at the memes, because people have done memes, which I think is just awesome. But looking at all of that and that conversation, a good chunk of it is built around the internal lore of the game and the NPCs that are running around, the world state, the elements to it like Zakul and Yagdul and things that are not coming up in the High Republic. It feels like in a lot of ways, it feels reminiscent of the High Republic and tied into the High Republic, but it's its own thing. And this is the single nice thing I'll say about Chris on this podcast, because I try to limit myself to one so that his ego does not get overinflated. But it's nothing short of incredible to me just how unique the world of For Light and Dice feels as a Star Wars entity. It's almost like the High Republic in that way, is there's nothing I've encountered that feels like the world of this game does.
What about you, Colton?
You're muted all of a sudden.
I am muted.
I hate Zoom. I hate Zoom so much. Anyway.
That's a partial answer to one of our later questions.
yeah, I splitting the party is one of my favorite things to do as a player. I enjoy forcing, because it really forces like characters that might not have interacted much in like the full group ensemble to interact with each other, which often creates really cool character moments. So yeah, no, I hope we get more. And I have some ideas as a player on how to accomplish that. So
I'm trying to figure out
Which
how
is
we're gonna
excited.
own 3 fucking ships in between like 5 people.
Right.
Take piloting lessons.
I mean, we
Uh,
did connect to them at one flight, so maybe we can just like make a Voltron ship and just
a
go.
Voltron ship. Before this game, I actually hate the practice of splitting players up, and the reason is because, bear in mind, I'm the one that's usually running a game, and I'm very concerned about making sure everybody that's at my table has fun. I want to maximize every player's ability to play, and when you split up the party, it can reduce the amount of playtime for the individual player. In college, when other people would run games, for whatever reason, they particularly enjoy taking one or two players aside and doing like a particular scene for them. And I remember just sitting around bored off my ass in the living room, waiting for them to come back in the room and doing the thing. And it made a narrative disconnect because I guess this mainly because of the people we're playing with. They didn't do a very good job of like playing against other people or playing off of other people. And they often would take the experience that they just had in a greedy way and not share it, which kind of defeats the purpose of doing that in the first place. So I'm glad that at least in this format, I can schedule time out and not feel bad about having more intimate sessions with a few of you because I'm not wasting anybody's time in that case. I'm not scheduling everybody to show up and only 2 of you talk. So this question is specifically for Robin. When we first meet Zero, they don't have memories of or traditional backstory like other player characters do. Since Zero didn't have a backstory to uphold, did that make it freeing or easier making character choices, or was it harder since you didn't have a backstory to bounce off of?
Yes. It does both in some interesting ways. It is often, I think, harder than I anticipate. I didn't create the character without a backstory, like for the reason of this will be easier, but it was definitely harder than what I was anticipating it would be. But I think the moment where not having a backstory really shine and become really fun for me is the moments where I get to be the POV character for just all of Star Wars. Because, like, I think Lysander kind of functions as, like, a POV character for the High Republic. Like, someone who is familiar with Star Wars, but, like, is new to this sort of corner of the galaxy. Whereas Zero is very much the sort of POV character for just all of Star Wars. So I can just jump in anytime and be like, Jedi, yeah, what's that about? I'd never heard of that before. Or, money. That's a weird concept. I don't know what that is. Anytime I can just not know something that everyone takes for granted, I eat that up. That is so much fun for me. But yeah, so it does both in various ways. It can be really challenging to, like, when you're presented with a situation and you don't have any sort of context for it, to be like, well, how do I react? Because my character hasn't experienced this before and has no context for this sort of thing. That can be more difficult. But yeah, I love the moments where I can be like, I don't know, you guys like eat stuff? What's that about? I don't really understand organics. It's weird.
I love that. Okay, this next question is for Colton. I would love to hear about the creation of Koryo. Was he created a result of One End's passing? Was he on retainer as a backup? Was he originally part of One End's backstory? I'm just real curious about him.
Yeah, so as a concept, Coriel has always kind of existed in One End's backstory. Originally, when I just, had One End at the beginning of this campaign, he wasn't force sensitive. He was just like a scientist that reprogrammed One End after One End, was sent to kill him. And then, One End was sent off into the world after becoming sentient. And then when I realized I was going to need a new character, I was sort of interested in, for a completely separate thing, I was doing some research on non-Jedi and Sith Force users, and I came across the Order of Sight Voltaic, and I was like, oh, that's really, really cool. A shout out to Star Wars Adventure Annual 2020, which is the one and only appearance of the Order of Sight Voltaic. The Order of the Sight Voltaic. And I was just like, it would be a really fun conceptualization to have a Force user from this group join the party, especially with Lysander dealing with the sort of implications of not being a Jedi but being a Force user. Yeah, he's also, his name, unlike 1N, who is, Leet Speech, Ian M. Banks, which is one of my favorite sci-fi authors, Coriel's name just sort of originated from my favorite Star Wars name, which is Moral Evil, or Moral Evil, in the tradition of bad Star Wars names, and then I just sort of, kept changing it slightly. Because it was originally, Laurel Evil, I think, in the, first 1N origination. And then Coriel was changed to make it more Quirmian, because I think he was human in the original, conceptualization. But, and then I just wanted to play Quirmian, so that's why he was a Quirmian.
Love that. All right, Gene asks a technical question. How is the online play handled? I know you roll physical dice, but do you use any kind of virtual tabletop like Roll20, or is it all just a video call with descriptions from Chris? We use Zoom, and it's all video. We use Theater of the Mind. I remember a conversation we had way before we even recorded our first session where I said, I may use Roll20, I'm not sure yet. And then I just decided, you know what, we're going to kind of approach this more like a radio drama, and I want the players to think about what the audience is going to listen to and kind of force us to describe things clearly and use theater of the mind. So that was intentional. Now, if we do any live play video shows, which I would like to in the future, I do anticipate incorporating some kind of visual element like a virtual tabletop system for stuff. But more on that a little bit later.
I think, again, bringing it back to the producing of the show, which is something that we haven't talked about a lot on previous BTS episodes. The producing of the show, it makes it a lot easier for us to make things clear to the audience if they also have to be clear to us. If we are forced to describe something out loud to the other players, the audience also hears that, versus if we all also see it. And that's something I really like about the dice rolls as well. Because the dice rolls, having the physical dice roll and not using an online dice roller, yeah, it's the honor system, but it also forces us, just by that nature, to call out the rolls. So we never forget to call out what a roll is, because we are calling it out to each other, and thus the audience can hear it. So not having a visual component, at least for the entirely audio-based shows, I think is a really smart producing choice that was made.
It's also just really cool to hear this. That's just such a satisfying thing as you're listening to, because I've listened to another show that was a tabletop show, and they didn't keep in their die roll, and it just sounded so dead. But that's just such a good sound in this kind of show,
Yeah, I agree. Oh, God, I'm reading the question now. Hey, this next question came from Matt, aka Gray Fox. Hey, this question is for Chris. I remember you saying something in Phase 2 of the High Republic that messed up your plans for the campaign. What was it?
I want to know this too, actually.
I also badly want to know this information.
It was the origin of the Gaze Electric. I assumed that Ro, or the Rhodes specifically, built that ship themselves. I did not know they hijacked it from a group of crazy cultists. I was pretty surprised. And I had some ideas.
That was the big thing? Oh.
Well, there's one other big thing too, but I'm not going to talk about that until the end of season 2. But that was one of the bigger things, because I had in my mind an idea for a storyline that was going to involve the Gaze Electric, but if I'm honoring canon, I can't do that, because it turns out Gaze Electric wasn't built the way I thought it was built, and here we are.
I'd like to go to the Gaze Electric.
Would you, though?
Gosh, it's almost like the mother ruins everything she touches.
She does. I hate her.
I hate her so much.
I can have a question for Chris. So, give us 3 words of what you have sort of possibly planned for season 2 that we could also wreck and go to Yagdal.
3 words. I mean, this is a cop out, but this is the honest one. I don't know.
That is 3 words. Fuck you.
Yeah, I don't know because I don't know what y'all are gonna do. I know how it's gonna start. I think the audience who's familiar with High Republic knows how season 2 is gonna start. How are your characters gonna react to it? Are you gonna change your plans? Is there gonna be more trauma to deal with? I don't know. I honestly do not know, and so it's hard for me to imagine what season 2 is gonna be like. The way I kind of construct a game is I think about the setting. Think about the characters in that setting and their motivations, but then I let kind of the dice lead me to where things are going to land. So I never, like when I'm doing a dungeon dive in a D&D game, I don't think about, okay, players are going to go here, then here, then here. I think about, okay, if I'm a wizard that's creating this dungeon, why? How have I constructed it? What's its usability? Where's the kitchen? Where do people go to the bathroom? I think about that. I think about it in those terms. So because of that, and because I have absolutely zero structure to how I approach writing a game in terms of a story, I don't know how it's going to go. I have a rough idea. I have a very specific idea for the beginning. I have a rough idea about where I would like for season 2 to land, and that's it. Just to kind of give you an example, my notes for how I would love season 1 to end is I'll literally read off what I have. Players will have a home base. They'll get along. They'll resolve some kind of major storyline and live happily ever after. That's kind of roughly how I wanted season 1 to end. And I think roughly, you defeated a main antagonist. You have a place in Naboo, and even though a character died, you all are a happy family. You're that found family now. And I do view season 1 as the introduction to the story, not necessarily chapter 1. If that makes sense.
I find that really interesting because we're all trying to get the fuck off Naboo. We don't want to be here anymore. Let us go.
Well, and we'll talk about that in season 2, which I'm very excited about. So Gene asked a question for the players. If you knew what you know now about the game system and the type of playback when you all started, would you change how you created your character in any way?
No.
No.
Yeah, no.
Possibly?
Not really.
The way I made Gaz, because I'd never played tabletop before, I made up her character first, and then I was like, fuck, I need a class. And so then I just had to kind of force a class on Gaz, because, none of them quite matched up, and, the operative in Star Wars 5e is the rogue in D&D, so I'm, looking at the Legends of Vox Machina, and Vax'ildan is doing a bunch of cool shit, and I was like, Gaz is supposed to be doing that? Oh, fuck. But, I kind of liked that I did it the way I did, because it forced me to kind of think hard about why again why she has Sasha and why she can't quite do the things she can do. So on one hand, I might have in the future I'll probably pick the class first and then make the character around it. But I kind of like how I did it for my first time, because it was a lot of falling up and figuring it out opposed to how I did it. So I probably would do it differently in the future, but I don't really regret it, how I did it this time, because I learned, everybody.
That's awesome. No, we're hashtag no regrets in this group. Okay, second to last question. But this is the last listener question. Anna, aka Biohazard, asked, is there anything, a detailed backstory piece, fun fact, etc., about your characters that you feel you don't talk about enough? Colton shakes their head no.
Not really a background. Well, I don't talk about, or rather, it's because I don't do the voice, mainly because I can't do a good voice for Lysander, considering that he is a cis male. But Lysander in my head has a southern accent, just like Eli Vanso. So there's that.
Watch a lot of Steel Magnolias.
Or I guess it's more like...
Yeah.
It's more like how, if you've read the Thrawn books, Price technically should also have some kind of, outer rim, more rural accent, but she trained herself to not talk like that. And it's like Lysander also has trained himself to not talk in that accent because he's like, I don't
Oh,
want
interesting.
people to think less of me from being from wild space. And since we don't know anything about Lysatra, I think that Lysatra is not part of the Republic right now, so.
So you say that, but then that would set up, if we meet Lysander's family, the sort of Hera in Rebels accent sneaking back out.
Yeah, it would definitely come back if you were to meet his family or like people he knew from Lysatra.
I don't know. I think I've said it on the podcast before, but if I have, it's probably only been once or twice. Is that there is actually a reason why Zero wears a poncho, and that is because their like internal components are so loud that the poncho dampens the noise. Because I gave the character, I voluntarily took disadvantage on stealth checks. Because their insides are so noisy and they wear a thick poncho to dampen the sound. But I very rarely bring it up, and largely that is because I forget.
I think you only mentioned it like in those like that first session when we were on Coruscant still.
Yep, probably.
Yeah.
So I skimmed through the pilot, which is the short story that I wrote for Chris, which is just Wynn's backstory. Because I didn't want to send Chris a couple of paragraphs. I wanted to send him something more interesting than that. And I also wanted to give him some characterization and things to work with, especially for Irvin, who pops up in season 1. Skimming through this, there's a lot of answers I have to this question. There's a particularly funny one as to one of the things Wynn did that I don't want to reveal, not because it's a spoiler, but because eventually the pilot will come out and everybody will get to read. But I will say the thing that stuck out to me, skimming back through the pilot, to look at like what is an element that hasn't come up that I think about a lot, is going to be Wynn's relationship with their family. That Wynn has sort of offhandedly mentioned, that they're going to talk to their family a little bit. They dodged the question. And family being so important to Lysander and to Gauze, and every time it comes up, Wynn deflects, and I as a player deflect. And that is for a reason. And I would be interested at some point, maybe not to have it come up in a direct way, but I would like to explore at some point Wynn's very complicated feelings about their family, and specifically the choices that Wynn made, why Wynn thought they were making those choices, why they were really making those choices, and that very complicated dynamic, the choices that their family let them make. Like, let them go out and make maybe not great decisions. It's an interesting element to their backstory and why they are the way they are, why they are so deflective, and why also they're a little bit concerned with, helping Gauze and Lysander do their stuff with their own families, while Wynn themselves never brings up their relationship with their family, except the fact that their parents are still alive and they talk to them occasionally. And that's all we know. And so that's something I'm looking forward to. There's a lot of stuff in Wynn's backstory that has come out, but there's also a lot of stuff that hasn't come out yet as to why they are the way they are and the relationships that they have had with people. Irvin, we've already seen, is a big one, but the other one would be with their parents. That's something that may come up in the future, and I'm really hoping that it does.
I think for me, it's kind of the opposite. Like, I actually kind of wish I held more back. Like, my fatal flaw as a writer is I get, like, really excited about stories. I just want to tell them. And I'm not really good at holding back stories. So I actually wish I held back more over the course of season 1. But I don't know. It is what it is. It fucking happens. So I just can't change it now. So that would probably be the thing. I feel like I actually maybe shared too much, and I kind of wish I held some stuff back. And then I wrote Gauze's journal, which is like 13 pages for family. So, which was fun. I really do like the journal, and I like that avenue of like maybe that's how I get that little niche of like that little writing bug out of me, because between like we'll finish the session and then I'll think about the session for like 2 weeks and like can't do anything with it. So I do like this avenue of writing the journals because it lets me get my feelings out, and I think that will help me to not share too much because I felt like I gave away my hand a little bit too much in season 1, but I learned. I didn't know how long it was going to go. I didn't know there would be a car. So what about you, Chris? What about you? Do you feel like there are things about Gonk in 1 and 2?
Well, nothing on that front. But mine is outside of the story of the game, but the game itself. We sprinkle it in from time to time, and I feel like October is LGBT queer history month. I don't think we talk enough about the fact that we're a queer podcast. That all of our guests so far, and this will likely change. I'm not trying to discriminate against people, but all of our guests are queer friendly or actually queer themselves. We are all on some variation of the alphabet people, as they say, and there are a lot of. I've tried listening to other D&D podcasts in the past. I was a big fan of one made by a comic book writers that are now become extremely toxic and bigoted, and I don't approve. That I used to be a fan of. There just wasn't a lot of queer representation in this particular space, and in the spirit of the High Republic, which thankfully has included queer coded and actual queer characters, it felt right to make this representative of that as well. And so we need to, I think, the upcoming year, not to throw real life politics into it, but for the rest of this year and next year, it's going to be a really hard time for those of us in the queer community. I think there's a lot of battles that we're going to have to fight. And I think we need to shout from the heavens a bit more that we are part of that community. I'm proud of that myself. And, that's just my main thought of that. And fuck the haters.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
Fuck the haters.
As Robin flicks birds in the voice.
Yeah, Robin is expressing themselves appropriately with the middle finger. So last question. This is my question to you all. What are your predictions for season 2?
Predictions are what we would like to see, because those are two very different things.
I mean, I'm open to any answer, really.
Chaos.
Yeah, well, yeah. Because this is just my answer to everything now in this era of Star Wars. The Yuzan Vong.
Fuck off!
Fuck you.
Fuck off!
I will never include them in this game. I can tell you that right now.
We're at the point now where the joke of Colton shoehorning the Yuzan Vong into every podcast that they're on with me, we may end up just reading through New Jedi Order just because Colton keeps bringing the Yuzan Vong up, even though I hate them. I have a serious theory and a kind of crackpot theory. My serious theory is Kassav. I think Kassav is going to show up at some point. Because I do think that I have my own conspiracy theory about the casting of Kassav, and by conspiracy theory I mean I brought it up at every possible opportunity because I think it's funny. So I do think that it's Kassav. My sort of crackpot theory is that we're going to be at some major event from Light of the Jedi. So it's either going to be Elfrona, the raid on Elfrona, or it's going to be the Battle of the Kur Nebula we're going to be at.
See, I have the opposite end. I think we're going to be at a major event, but it's going to be the season finale at Valo. But it depends on how fast we move through that time. So it really depends on how many side trips do we take. I think we're going to see the great hyperspace disaster, y'all.
Well,
that's my theory.
I feel like that is definitely the jumping off point, or at least we're going to start after it's happened. Maybe.
I hope we start during it. Like, we're flying to Zakul, and then hyperspace fucks itself.
Yeah, see, that was my theory.
Oh, yeah.
I literally think that's going to happen. I literally think that's probably what's going to happen. And I will never be happier that I have a +7 to piloting checks.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think hyperspace disaster happens while we're flying to Zakul, and we don't make it there. We get yoinked out of hyperspace and all of the hyperspace nonsense.
I don't think we make it Zakul until like at least season 3.
Yeah.
Or later.
I think it's going to be a hot minute.
What I would like to see, this is not theory, this is just what I would like to see, is what I've been saying since the beginning of this podcast. Is I'd like to see Marcion Rowe, and I'd like Lysander to meet Marcianro because
You
I
understand if
am
this
in
happens, there might be a leveler there too, right?
yeah, that's fine.
My real theory here for what we might encounter in later seasons is Shri Kare Kare.
No, well,
They're coming to take you away.
right now, if we're still in wave 1, well, yeah, no,
Yeah, there's no leveler
he
yet.
doesn't have his funny little dog yet.
Funny little dog.
Funny
Anyway,
in
let
air
me
quotes.
live in my Delulu era.
I know what weird planet I'm going to suggest we go to on this season. So
I'll be ready for it. I'll be so ready for it.
Plays year 15?
well, ooh, I know my 2
Now it's 2.
My, crackpot theory is something I've wanted from every pre-Phantom Menace Star Wars story, and that is just, regular Joe Schmo, Chad Skywalker. Shmi Skywalker exists. It there stands that there are probably just regular fucking Skywalkers just, living their lives out there somewhere.
That would, in fact, be consistent with some stuff George Lucas has said.
Yeah, Jane
He
Skywalker.
has said that that Skywalker is just the Smith of the galaxy. It's not that special. So it's why it's really funny that no other piece of Star Wars media has anyone with the last name Skywalker that is not related to that lineage.
I played a one-shot once. A friend of mine ran. It was so funny. We were detectives in Coruscant investigating a murder, and he referred to that they didn't identify who was killed. So the inspector NPC says, "Yeah, this is John Skywalker. He's blah 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 blah." And we were like, "John Skywalker." He's like, "You know, that's the galaxy's John Doe." It's like, oh.
you know what I think is going to happen, and this is going to be my final theory of what's going to happen to the crew of the Squonk. Maybe not in season 2, but at some point, they are going to get sent to the Chiss Ascendancy.
It's so funny because, I don't talk about this too, but since Lysander's from Lysatra, he does know stuff about the Chiss, at least legends, and it's also something I haven't talked about that Lysander has written fan fiction that's published on the HoloNet about Chiss.
I think they would not appreciate that, but that's funny.
I'm going to also preface by what I would like to see is I would love us to meet Loden, but I would also like us to see Cantum. I think Cantum would be really fun.
Yes.
And the High Republic kids, Lula and Perzella
The Star
and
Hopper crew, yeah.
The Star Hopper crew. Buckets of blood.
When trying
trying
so hard not to swear in front of the actual children.
Right. Buckets of blood. Give it to me.
Oh my god.
But my theory, I think, with 3 out of 5 of the crew members having some sort of family thing, and in hearing what Charles has sent to Chris and knowing what I've sent to Chris, I think we're going to see a family member from one of us 3.
Okay. Well, y'all, this was amazing. I cannot wait for season 2. It's going to be a disastrous time. I look forward to the new era for Light and Dice. Thank you all so much for listening to the show. Again, we have a Discord. If you haven't already joined it and you want to hang out with us, you certainly can. It's free. Just look for our link tree. It's there. And
As we end the various episodes, the sort of ending of season 1, this will be sort of the finale. Because I know at least 4 of the other people on this show have other podcasts. Do we want to do one brief shout out of things that all of us do that we want to draw attention to right at the end?
I mean, wait, you're asking me to promote your podcast on my...
I'm asking you to promote your podcast.
Can we also thank everybody for sending in questions? That was really
that was awesome.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
so
Appreciate you.
So Charles is right.
everyone.
A lot of us have other side projects and other podcasts. So for me, I have Dark Side Divas, which is my Star Wars podcast, Marvelous Divas, which is my MCU, sort of MCU podcast, and that's what I do. So if you want to hear my nerdy voice some more in a little bit more raunchier format, you can check those podcasts out. Anybody else can promote themselves. I listen to all y'all shows, so.
Hope you want to promote
Yeah, Hope.
yours, or Colton?
There's so many.
Hope
Like
is so
that.
popular.
Say something.
Hi, yeah, I do J Guys and Jedi, but we've been on hiatus because my co-podcaster's house burned down, but he got a new house and it's beautiful.
Yay.
And so we're hopefully gonna be starting back up soon. So I do that. I work at Dork Side of the Force, I work at Collider, I work at Wealthy Geeks, and the Geeky Waffle. You can find me all there. There's a link tree on my Twitter. It has all my shit. And then I do this. I'm tired. At all times.
Jess, you wanna promote that show that you're on?
I guess.
That little show.
That glorious, chaotic show.
Yeah.
Jess is so excited.
I'm also on the podcast Rupalp's Pod Race, which is also on hiatus. When we'll come back, who knows? But you can listen to our backlog of episodes. I think there's like over 100. I don't remember. It's chaos. I black out most of the time when we record.
And I am a co-host of the Gold Squadron Gaze podcast. We are not on hiatus, but we are covering, as of time of recording this episode, books, and we're about to start comics if the SAG strike does not resolve here in the next week or two. So that is also where you can find me. Whenever the SAG strike is over, we will be going back to covering Ahsoka, but we are waiting for the work stoppage to end before we do that.
Does Robin and Colton have cool stuff?
I'm not on any I don't have like my own podcasts other than this one. I'm a voice actor. I'm on a couple audio drama, just small bit parts and stuff I can't talk about right now. But if you are making stuff that requires voice actors, you can email me at robinjmosscreative@gmail.com.
Just listen to that smooth voice. Don't you want that voice on your project? Yeah.
Don't you want this voice on your podcast?
Yes, actually, that sounds great.
Yeah, I know, right? Play that character next.
I'm gonna have you record a new intro for Gold Squadron.
Oh, there
so
we
it doesn't
go.
have to be
That'd be fun.
Bradley's annoying voice.
Actually, can you do a southern drawl and then...
Hey,
y'all.
y'all.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Wow. Wow.
Colton, you got anything?
As of recording, no.
Oh.
But possibly soon. Depending on how schedules align, I may or may not have something.
Wow.
So pay attention to my Twitter, as there might be information coming soon. Fingers crossed.
Nice.
I know what this something might be, and I really hope it happens because it's very cool.
The spin-off's already happening, y'all. I love it. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for listening. We'll talk to you later. And yeah, may the Force be with you.
Bye!
Bye, thank you.
Bye.
We'll try not to blow
Goodbye.
stuff up in season 2 and kill Colton's character.
Again.
Well, everybody, that's our behind-the-scenes episode. I certainly hope you enjoyed it and you found it interesting. I want to first give a massive shout-out to Hope, who actually edited this episode. Life on my side has been a little bit crazy, so she was nice enough to step up and kind of take the reins and do all the editing, so really appreciate them for that. What else, y'all? Oh, if you want to hang out with us between episodes, you can find our social media on the social media platform formerly known as Twitter. If you do a search for @ForLightAndDice, you can find us there. There's also a link in our profile where you can have access to our Discord, which is free for everybody. Definitely recommend you join if you want to hang out with us. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to our podcast via your favorite podcast platform of choice. Leave a review. We would appreciate that. And most importantly, tell your friends about us. We certainly would love to have more listeners enjoy our little adventures. And, well, that's about it. Coming up next, y'all, the premiere of Season 2, which I can tell you for a fact, because we've already recorded the first session, it will be disastrous. Can't wait for y'all to hear it and check it out. Anyway, once again, may the Force be with all of you.